The history of civil rights is a complex and evolving narrative that spans centuries, cultures, and continents. It is the story of humanity's struggle for equality, dignity, and freedom in the face of systemic oppression and discrimination. While the specifics vary across time and place, common themes of resistance, resilience, and reform connect these movements across history. The concept of civil rights, basic rights that protect individuals from unjust treatment by governments or other entities, can be traced back to early civilizations. Ancient documents such as the Code of Hammurabi, circa 1754 BCE, and the Edicts of Ashoka, 3rd century BCE, reflect early attempts to codify laws and establish principles of justice and fairness. Philosophical foundations of civil rights emerged in ancient Greece and Rome, where thinkers like Aristotle and Cicero debated the nature of justice, citizenship, and equality. However, these early systems often excluded large portions of society, such as women, enslaved people, and non-citizens. The medieval period saw the emergence of significant legal milestones, such as the Magna Carta in 1215, which limited the power of the English monarchy and established certain rights for nobles. While the Magna Carta primarily protected the elite, it laid the groundwork for the idea that rulers are not above the law, a principle fundamental to later civil rights movements. The Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries was a turning point in the history of civil rights. Philosophers like John Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Rousseau emphasized natural rights, the social contract, and the equality of all men. These ideas inspired revolutionary movements, including the American Revolution, 1775-1783, and the French Revolution, 1789-1799. Both revolutions championed ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, although they fell short of extending these rights to all individuals, particularly enslaved people, women, and indigenous populations. The U.S. Declaration of Independence, 1776, famously proclaimed that all men are created equal, but the institution of slavery and the exclusion of women and Native Americans highlighted the contradictions within these revolutionary ideals. Similarly, the French Revolution abolished feudal privileges and declared the rights of man and of the citizen. Yet these rights were not universally applied. The 19th century witnessed significant strides in the abolition of slavery, a critical chapter in the history of civil rights. The transatlantic slave trade was a brutal system that forcibly uprooted millions of Africans, subjecting them to inhumane treatment and exploitation. Abolitionist movements emerged in Europe and the Americas, driven by moral, religious, and political motivations. The British Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act in 1807, outlawing the transatlantic slave trade, followed by the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which emancipated enslaved people in most British colonies. In the United States, the abolitionist movement gained momentum in the mid-19th century, culminating in the Civil War, 1861-1865, and the Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln in 1863. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1865, formally abolished slavery. Despite these victories, the end of slavery did not result in full equality. In the United States, the Reconstruction era, 1865-1877, saw significant efforts to integrate formerly enslaved people into society as equal citizens. But these gains were rolled back by the rise of Jim Crow laws, segregation, and disenfranchisement. The 20th century was marked by numerous civil rights movements worldwide, each addressing different forms of systemic oppression. The American Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s was one of the most prominent struggles for racial equality. African Americans, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and others, fought against segregation, discrimination, and voter suppression. Landmark events such as the Montgomery bus boycott, 1955-1956, the March on Washington, 1963, and the passage of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and the Voting Rights Act, 1965, represented significant milestones in the fight for equality. The women's suffrage movement, which began in the 19th century, gained momentum in the early 20th century. Women in New Zealand were the first to gain the right to vote in 1893, followed by other nations over the next decades. The feminist movement of the 1960s and 1970s expanded the fight to include issues like workplace equality, reproductive rights, and protection from gender-based violence. In the mid-20th century, decolonization movements swept across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean as nations under colonial rule demanded independence and self-determination. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in India, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and Nelson Mandela in South Africa became symbols of resistance against imperialism and apartheid. In 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations, established a global framework for civil rights. The latter half of the 20th century also saw the rise of movements advocating for LGBTQ+ rights. Events like the Stonewall riots in 1969 in New York City marked a turning point, leading to greater visibility and advocacy for equal rights. Over the decades, many countries decriminalized homosexuality, legalized same-sex marriage, and passed anti-discrimination laws, though significant challenges remain in many parts of the world. The fight for civil rights continues in the 21st century, addressing both long-standing and emerging issues. Movements like Black Lives Matter, founded in 2013, have highlighted systemic racism and police brutality. The Nasr and Me Too movement has brought attention to sexual harassment and gender inequality. Indigenous communities worldwide are advocating for land rights, cultural preservation, and environmental justice. Technological advancements have also transformed civil rights advocacy. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for organizing, raising awareness, and documenting injustices, amplifying voices that were historically marginalized. The history of civil rights is a testament to humanity's enduring pursuit of justice and equality. While significant progress has been made, the struggle is far from over. Each generation inherits the responsibility to challenge oppression and expand the boundaries of inclusion, ensuring that the ideals of liberty and equality are realized for all.
Thank you for listening to History Videos 101. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more fascinating content.